Hi folks and welcome back to the What's Your Meta Insight series. Now this week we have got a very special guest and head coach from Dirtschool, Andy Barlow. Now if you know anything about mountain biking and more specifically skills coaching, you will know that Andrew Barlow is one of the most progressive and up-to-date skills coaches in the business. Obviously, he's a massive part of the Dirtschool family, but not only that, we're going to talk about Andy's background and we're also going to talk about how he is helping to upskill the next generation of Scottish and British downhillers, as well as enduro riders. So sit back, grab a cup of tea and enjoy. Mr. Andrew Barlow from Dirtschool, how are we doing, mate?
Very well, mate. How are you?
Very grand, thank you. I'm holding up pretty well in the middle of the lockdown. I think we're about 6 weeks in or something like that now. I can't remember.
Yeah,
No, the date.
it's strangely, it's flying by and somehow dragging at the same time.
Yeah, there was a point when I think every day went really quick from like 9 o'clock till 6. And as you'll know as well, having a little one now in your life, it's different. But I see you're now in the new head office of Dirtschool.
Yeah, well, we took on a premises on the High Street in Innerleithen just at the end of the last year, start of this year. So and my wife and I moved down here just in, well, when was that? February, basically, end of January, February. So yeah, it's been a lot of change, all of it positive though.
That's the thing, it's the goalposts move when you become a dad, eh?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when we knew Colleen was pregnant, there was a sense of urgency sort of suddenly kind of came over the situation, which isn't a bad thing, because we've managed to get a lot done in the last year. The rest of the team especially, like everyone's just killing it. So, yeah.
And you guys have recently, before we start delving into actual comments, you guys have just recently started doing something else, haven't you, around the Tweed Valley?
That's right. We're doing a few things actually. So Dirtschool's been on the go for over 10 years, and that's mountain bike coaching. So we've got a good reputation for doing that. But we've always been asked to do guiding as well. So last year we launched something called Tweed Valley Guides, simply because it's something that we're set up to be able to provide something like that. We've certainly got all the systems behind the scenes to sort of handle bookings and things. And we've got the best local knowledge and the best riders that can actually show people how to get the best out of the trails, But we'd never actually provided it as a service. So we changed that last year and did Tweed Valley Guides, which is kind of what the shop is about as well. Is it creates a meeting place for people to actually come into Innerleithen and sort of, meet other people, meet groups, meet our classes, and then also go for a ride from there. So
I think it also adds that other dimension to the business. It's not just purely online. It's actually not just online on trails. There's another site,
yeah,
etc. But let's
we're
everyone, if you've not been living under a rock in Scotland, the name Andrew Barlow will be very well known. Obviously for great reasons, good reasons. But what was your background, Andy, and what's the evolution of you now to where you are, and from where you were to where you are now, and how did all that happen? I know you used to race XC, but what's your kind of story in a little nutshell?
Well, I mean, I was a frustrated skateboarder, if I'm honest. When I was a young kid, I always wanted to be good at skateboarding, and I never was. And I lived in Christorfin, basically. So we had Christorfin Woods on our doorstep. And then probably when I was in about third or fourth year, I basically got into cycling in a weird way where we went on like the cycle tour with the school I was at. And off the back of that, saved up loads of money, bought a mountain bike, went to my first race, and that's it. That's been the last 25 years. It's just been mountain biking. So initially it was cross country, and then a few close friends and I got into downhill right at the start. So that's probably like 92, 93. We were racing downhill. We were pioneering. My first race was up the Golfy, but it basically came down the way that we now cycle back up again. So that's how dated the scene it was back then. And it's just gone from there. Raced a bit of downhill, cross country, wee bit of BMX in there, dabbled a bit on the road, but mostly just trail riding. Yeah.
You've been quite humble there, but I'm pretty sure you won quite a lot of races as well, did you not, on your mountain bike, or had some?
One or two. No, I like to ride. I like to go fast. I think I was one of these kids that I was impossible to control when I was young because I had so much energy. And for me, when I found mountain biking, it was just the perfect escape. I was always being told everywhere else to slow down and pay attention and wait for everyone else. And then I jumped on my bike and it was like people were saying, go faster, go as hard as you can, it was, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't found mountain biking.
It's very true, because I think actually my story of sport is, well, cycling is sport. It's one sport led to another. But, it's like anyone who is into bike riding, it slowly takes over your life, or quickly takes over your life and becomes the one and only thing you do. So my cycling as another thing for me to vent that energy. And it sounds like you kind of recognize that yourself. But
absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, everyone who's here and watching this, we love riding bikes, and that's the most important part of it. So 92 started doing a bit of mountain biking. We obviously know you more from the point of view that you're working with Dirtschool now. But can you kind of give people who don't know really much about the history of the whole Tweed Valley? 92 you started mountain biking, and then there's a gap between sort of Dirtschool starting up in the 2000s. But what was, I mean, Glen Tress was around back then, but it's very different now to what it was like then. So what was it kind of like back in the early days?
Well, I mean, I remember the first few times I came down here, we would just jump in a car and drive to Glen Tress. And at the time, it was right where the Red Route now finishes. There used to be a tiny little car park there, and that was it. And now it's actually blocked off. It's a lay-by where the uplift actually picks people up from. But that was it. And you were lucky if there was another car in the car park. We would drive down there, and we would basically just cycle around on all the walkers' paths. Now, I stopped mountain biking for a couple of years, probably about 2001, 2002. And I remember I was riding BMX a lot at the time. And when I got back into mountain biking, Glen Tress had been built. So that, and that was a huge thing. And I suppose the reason Glen Tress was built was because it was supposed to be an economic driver for rural areas after Foot and Mouth. So the idea was that you create these big facilities that draw people from busy areas and would stimulate the local economy here, So something called the Seven Stains popped up, and that was Glen Tress, Glentrool, Dalbeattie. There was loads of them all over the place. But I have to say, like, Glen Tress and Innerleithen have just smashed in terms of just their accessibility, what's on offer here. Probably their location as well, very close to, easy to get to from north of England, easy to get from Glasgow, Edinburgh, So yeah, big success story.
Yeah, I think you're totally right there. And that being that economic driver, I think we can definitely say that the towns of Peebles and Innerleithen and the surrounding areas wouldn't really be there as they are without bike sport.
Yeah. Well, bike sport Innerleithen, is that what you're talking about? Like, yeah, that was Tam Ferguson's old story, yeah. I mean, he was right in there from the start. They basically took, the story in Innerleithen specifically was they took all the old enduro motorbike trails, and then a lot of the local guys actually used to race enduro as well. And when mountain biking sort of came along, they kind of tweaked it a wee bit and ended up making some pretty technical trails, which were kind of, they were sort of leaders in the UK, certainly. There was a lot of people who used to race World Cups at the time. And when they raced in the UK, they would probably ride a bike that had less travel or maybe even a hardtail. But when they came to Innerleithen, they'd ride their World Cup bike. And that was the turning point, really. That's when things really started picking up.
So you've obviously, that's part of the history, I suppose, of British mountain biking as well, because there's not many people who are at a world level or have been, like, even back in the days of like Petey and all that as well, who's still relevant right now with the syndicate. Mm-hmm. These guys all raced at Innerleithen and downhill.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing when you look at the amount of local professional riders that have just popped up in the meantime. Rory Cunningham, Mark Scott, Katie Winton, Lewis Buchanan. You could go on and on. There is loads, and it's all to do with the mountain bike scene that just appeared here. There's the Tweed Valley's got other things going for it, obviously, as well. Tourism's a big draw, and there was a lot of industry here sort of until the early 90s, really. But I have to say, like, the adventure tourism has been a total turnaround. So.
Yeah, you've seen that definitely. From the way in which the Tweed Love has kind of grown arms and legs from just being, even like the kids mountain bike stage race that the People's Cycling Club put on. There's so it's not. I think this is probably the quietest time right now, well, globally, obviously, but the Tweed Valley's probably had when it comes to cycle sport. There's just nothing happening right now, whereas usually it's bang, bang, bang. If it's not,
this would be chaos at the moment. There'd be a race every weekend and another event, and hundreds and thousands of people sort of floating through. So
And not only that, you've also got Tour of the Border. You've had several kind of really big races come. I mean, the Tour of Britain's been there a few times. You've had national road race championships as well, and British road race championships come through the town centre of Peebles. And I've raced on a road bike in Peebles town centre as part of a big exhibition race many moons ago. But I think it's really important that we address the phenomenal success that Peebles has had. And this then leads on to Dirtschool. There would be no Dirtschool without the success story of Peebles ultimately.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, right at the start, so Chris Ball, my business partner, he started Dirtschool in 2007, I think it would have been. And he basically did it. He was at university at the time doing sports science, and he was doing a little business unit on the side. And he set it up basically so that Scottish Cycling would be able to subcontract somebody to run a downhill program. So he did it that way. And of course, one of the first athletes he ever worked with was Rory Cunningham, who you now work with. So Rory basically, to cut a long story short, won the Worlds that year in Fort William. And Chris got kind of sucked into Scottish cycling, and the program became something to do with Scottish cycling, you know. So I came on board maybe a couple of years after that, because Dirtschool was this thing that had been set up. It was kind of performance-based, and he had the van and the branding, and it was all there ready to go, but didn't have the time to do anything about it, really. Whereas I had the time, I was willing to make the gamble. So I came on board in 2009, and that's when we started doing day courses. We started doing a lot more private stuff. I think that's the same year the college started as well. And it's all just gone from there, basically, yeah.
Yeah, for those who joined the conversation and are not too sure who Chris Ball is, he's the guy behind inventing, ultimately, EWS. And just that now is probably the biggest growth part of cycle sport right now. The amount of people who are doing it. It even created a whole new industry within mountain biking, which is incredible.
Certainly a new discipline, yeah. I mean, the world of mountain biking used to be split in a funny way, where you would have people racing downhill and you'd have people racing cross country. So the downhillers with the, full body armor, top to bottom, adrenaline, big bikes. XC was more kind of like shaved legs, lycra, racing round laps on a track. But everyone that was a mountain biker did this thing in the middle that wasn't really represented. None of us really, raced World Cups or XC. We just went trail riding. And I think that's what enduro has managed to capture is it's a discipline that kind of reflects essentially what most mountain bikers do at the weekend. They take it easy on the climbs and they race their mates on the downhill. That's the sport of enduro. And I think, Baller's been instrumental in that, yeah.
And obviously that's gone through a real tough phase, as all global sport is right now. And
everything, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how maybe this situation maybe reformats what enduro looks like in the future. Fingers crossed we get some racing by the end of this year, at least domestically. I think there's...
Yeah. Well, Dirtschool's basically shut down just now, like we can't deliver anything. Tweed Valley Guides is obviously doing nothing. We were just about to, we basically had just launched essentially a bike shop here where we were going to do, e-bike hire, mechanical bike hire. We're going to start sort of selling bits and pieces, not like a conventional bike shop, but more something that's kind of based around the experience of riding. That's all just stopped, or at least it has for the moment. We'll pick it up again when we can.
I'm sure it will quickly gather momentum again. But you touched on just a moment ago, Andy, and the college. So you guys run a thing called BASE. Can you basically explain what BASE is? And I think it's a really interesting story because this is incredibly unique when it comes to education and nurturing young talent.
Yeah, so BASE stands for the Borders Academy of Sporting Excellence. And it's essentially it's a qualification that was kind of born out of Premiership football in England, believe it or not, because there was young guys signing up to clubs, and basically if they didn't make it as a professional player, they would be sort of dropped by the team. So all of a sudden they'd kind of dropped out of school to pursue this kind of dream, and all of a sudden they're 19, 20 years old and they've got nothing to fall back on. So the Premiership teams teamed up with local colleges so that these kids could pursue their dream of being a professional player, but at the same time they could pursue academic units as well. So if it didn't work out being a football player, they could always sort of go to university, or they had some sort of CV that they could present at the same time. Borders College tweaked that for rugby initially, and then very quickly the mountain biking just fell into place as well. So that was something that started in, as I said, I think it was 2009, maybe 2010. But that's been, I mean, we've had 150 students through in that time. You know, like last year at the World Championships, a quarter of the British team was ex-base students. It's phenomenal. You know, we've had podiums. We've got Holly Henderson world champs jersey on the wall over there, you know, like just all sorts. You couldn't have possibly, conceived that it was going to become that.
We'll come on to that, the next, obviously the evolution of that very, very soon. But again, it's just that melting pot of just pure circumstance that has made ultimately the Tweed Valley that little the genesis of the new change and the new wave of what's actually happened in mountain biking. And if Chris hadn't had the thoughts about creating Dirtschool, and then obviously the working with Rory, and there's so many pieces to the puzzle that maybe a lot of people who are actually listening or watching just now don't really know the history of it. And it's really, really nice for me, even, fan of the sport, and just recently having returned to mountain biking a long time ago. It's great for me to kind of be educated on it as well. So it's a really, really cool story.
Yeah. Well, the thing is though, like, I don't think there's any such a thing as talent. So talent is a mixture of a few things, and a big part of it is opportunity. You need the support, you need the time. Essentially, you need this kind of temperament and to want to do it as well. But you kind of mix all that together, and essentially that's what we've created with Base. You get kids that have got the support, because typically their parents ride, or their parents support them financially or with kit or whatever. They've got the opportunity, because the course exists in one of the best locations in the UK, if not the world, to ride. You know, the time, because it's a 3-year course, you fast forward through that entire kind of college education, 3 years. They've become phenomenal riders in that time, So it's like you're manufacturing talent, basically. That's essentially what we're doing. We're giving them the opportunity to be the best.
Yeah, it's like that little factory. And I mean, and people's been the hotbed of what it is about around cyclesport, and mainly the off-road and the gravity world. It's been immense. What was the percentage you said there at the World Championships? Was it like 50% of the athletes?
No, it was a quarter. There was 4 out of 12 of them were ex-base students.
Yeah.
Last year. I mean, that's at the downhill worlds. Who is that? It would be Jake Ebden, Reece Wilson. Oh, my memory. I hit my head a lot here. There was, quite a few of them.
And the thing is as well, it's that drip feeds, and obviously at the national British level and the Scottish level, that's stacked up as well with similar level athletes who are looking at that pathway that you guys are providing and seeing it very visibly in front of themselves, which is a massive thing. I think if you can see and you ride the same trails as Mark Scott or Reece or Rory or Katie, more importantly, or Polly, you can. It is measurable, and that's one of the biggest things about progressing within a sport and having a pathway, being able to measure yourself against these people in the real world on the actual trails that they ride. And you're not a million miles away from any of the action. And with Peebles being and Innerleithen being where it is, we've already spoke about how accessible it is, and it really, really helps that pathway. And I think right now, to be honest with you, when we look at enduro and we look at the future of downhill as well, I think it's really, really bright, I think, for the UK. And Scotland, obviously we are slightly biased being Scottish, but I think Scotland's having a massive part in it.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. Well, I think one of the reasons that it's become so popular in Scotland is because of the access to the outdoors. We've got very little sort of private land or restrictions in a lot of ways. Like, as long as you ride responsibly, you can ride almost anywhere. There are a few kind of places where you shouldn't. But essentially that's opened the door to mountain biking being a huge thing here. It's a lot more difficult to do that in England or Wales, because you've got sort of issues with land access. As I said, like, as long as you're doing it responsibly, you can ride pretty much anywhere up here. So.
Yeah, I think we forget how blessed we are with it.
Yeah, but you just take it for granted. I'll just ride over there. You don't even think about it.
I went with my family a couple of years ago. I took my cross bike thinking, I'll just go out and ride my cross bike, and suddenly you're like, you have to almost relearn the code of the outdoor code about what you should and shouldn't do, because in Scotland we are so blessed with just having relatively unlimited access to wherever you want to go, which is an incredibly unique situation, and again another part of this this whole phenomenon that we're imagining to create in Scotland, especially around that Peebles area. You spoke about Polly a moment ago, and give us another wee little look at that World Championship jersey that's
that's up on the wall over there. That's it there. What were
the background?
Yeah.
Obviously, Polly's on base.
Yeah.
Riding EWS, pretty much as a full-time, not quite pro, but a very high-level privateer, an incredibly young athlete. But this is off the back of another initiative that Dirtschool has started, Andy. Can you kind of brief us on what that is?
That's right, yeah. So we were approached, when would it be? In the start of year before last, I think it was, about a program that we could put together for basically to create an opportunity for young up-and-coming enduro riders. And it was all to do with, unfortunately, the really unfortunate passing of a guy called Derek Laughlin. So he was a guy that was passionate about racing, about mountain biking, about enduro. And unfortunately, he passed away at one of the enduro races a couple of years ago. And I think his family just felt that he'd taken so much pleasure out of riding in those events that there must be something they could kind of give back, sort of in his memory. So they spoke with Fraser Copeland, who runs the series, and basically, sort of, through conversations, we put together a little program so that there was an opportunity for 2 junior riders basically to be fully supported in terms of training with you, and to get technical insight as well through Dirtschool. So over a few months, we allowed them to basically just kind of make much faster progress than they normally would. I suppose in some ways, the reason that we had to do that is because those kind of opportunities exist in more established sports like road, track, mountain biking even, like XC. They don't exist for new up-and-coming sports like enduro. So I suppose in a lot of ways, we're pioneering these kind of opportunities as well. I mean, these are opportunities, I'm sure you had similar ones on the road. I certainly had them when I was a junior, and not everybody gets those opportunities. So to be able to create something like that for such a new sport was brilliant. We jumped on it, and I think we've been fairly successful with that. I mean, the kids respond so well to that sort of stuff.
I think it's no coincidence that some of the mastermind behind a lot of these changes and these opportunities that we're talking about is ultimately coming down to guys like yourself and Chris. Chris has been a massive innovator, and the guy just will not stop trying to keep on pushing, and it's
keeps us all very busy.
we laugh about him all the time because he's never at home. He's always doing something crazy somewhere. Well, he's climbing.
Well, I think he's on lockdown just now, so he's turned his attention to the garden. You could do a whole podcast about his garden now.
Yeah, he's actually dealing with being locked down because he's just such an international man of mystery. But I mean, talking about the Laughlin Prize, that of course, son of Derek was obviously Scott Laughlin. So
Scott, yeah, brilliant rider, yeah.
Scotty YouTube, as the boys call him. He's following online. Scott's been known for being on the GMBN as well as doing his own really, really popular YouTube channel, and it's great to see. I think for the legacy, for the family, it's been a massive, massive help to help that. You're never going to replace a loved one that you've lost, but there's something really, really, and this is where I work with you guys on this, and it makes me really proud to be there and stand alongside you with Dirtschool and help young athletes and show them that they're more than capable of doing this, and giving them every opportunity to be the best athlete that they can be. They're still athletes. I mean, age is roughly, late teens. So some of them are even just coming out of school. I mean, this year we've got 2 young athletes and they're pretty much both just fresh out of school. And
yeah, that's right.
For
but
me,
they're sponges at that age, It's a funny one as well, because, I mean, you deal with people's fitness. I suppose we deal with people's technique predominantly. You can't really teach someone something that they wouldn't be able to work out for themselves given enough time. But of course, what people like you and I do is we save people all that time. We really do. It's like these kids could work it out, but it would probably take them 10 years to do so. if we can teach them how to train properly, how to structure their training, how to get the feedback loop in terms of technique, how to pace their races, how to strategize them, you've just saved them a decade in the space of a few months. And I think that's the accelerated learning that opportunities like that allow.
I think that's also a generational thing, because the phrase is always every generation should learn from the one before. But the amount of athletes that I work with who are not dirt school athletes, and they're not on they're not doing EWS, or they have got a mountain biking background, the amount of times that I'll refer to something in training and they'll say, I can just remember Andy Barlow standing at the side of the trail when I was shouting things at me like, drop your heels, drop your elbows.
Bend your elbows.
And that again is indicative of how much what you're talking about there, and trying to improve and speed up that learning process, and those feedback loops, which are really, really important when it comes to that feedback that the athlete needs instantaneously. That for me just kind of signals how influential that, like at Olympic, you've been to the off-road world, especially in Scotland. And no doubt the work that you guys are doing in Dirtschool and the stuff you are still doing is going to make a huge impression on the next generation of British, actually European level and world level athletes. So,
I hope so, yeah. Well, it's that sort of thing again where I had a lot of opportunities when I was a youngster, and to be able to kind of like pay that back in some way and kind of improve the scene is such an honor to be able to do that. It feels like I've kind of, like in the same way that someone would be sponsored to do a PhD, it's like essentially I get a salary to study mountain biking, and to share my findings. And that's brilliant. To be able to call that a job is fantastic.
It's very true. I mean, I've been in sport now for 31 years. Oh my God. And I kind of look at myself as got a degree in cycling. It's not a bit of paper, but the life skills and the things that I've gained from my sport and the way it's made me look at what skills it's gave me, which are transferable into the real world. Yes,
yeah. Well, there's a big part of base kind of goes into that as well, because very few of them will make it as top professional riders. A lot of them give it a really good go, and they're fantastic riders, don't get me wrong, but it's really tough to kind of crack that last little bit and make a living out of it, a proper living out of it. But hopefully the skills that they pick up on the course, they can transfer to all sorts of other things. So we've over the years, we've had so many emails and messages from ex-students saying that they now run a rope access business in Canada, and they apply the same kind of like strategy, the same goal setting, the periodization, the same drive, the same professionalism, punctuality. It's just, that's really satisfying when you get those messages back from guys like that have just been approved for their visa or have started a business elsewhere in the world or something. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that just shows you, again, I think a lot of athletes and a lot of people, when they do sport, whether it's at a very high level or as a job, they're so busy doing that and being in that bubble, and that bubble's all that matters to them. But the thought, I mean, I've dealt with this recently, well, not too recently, but in the last few years when I retired from the sport, was that, what am I going to do after that? I always made sure I get my hand in other bits, and I did a bit of social stuff, and I did a lot of blogging and stuff in media. But I wasn't aware of those skills until I sat down like a performance lifestyle manager in my final year and said, what can I do?
What do I do?
But a prime example is what you just said. It's that you learn the skills by the doing. The doing in life is really important, and not only that, but making the mistakes. And that then leads on to the coaching element about what you guys do, and we're going to lead on to that in a wee second, is that learn experience from the bad experiences. The good experience, a little bit woolly. And sometimes you actually make the good experience up in your brain to be better than it actually was. But the bad experiences are really, really the nuggets of gold, and why it's really important to focus on that and understand that they are actually when the learning is actually happening.
Yeah. It's funny, we've changed the way that we deliver the base course, certainly. And it's now, I'd really focus on what we'd call like process-based goals as opposed to outcome-based goals. And a lot of that is almost to protect the riders mentally, because they put so much emphasis on the result. And actually it's the process. That's where you learn, is actually in the mistakes or the things that you could have done better, the things that you need to go away and work on. And that's the true sort of test of a successful athlete, really, is if they recognize that and they don't get disheartened. They spend a bit of time working on their weaknesses and they take a stronger game to the next challenge, the next competition.
I suppose the best cliche analogy to use to explain what you said there in a bit more of a layman's term is that it's not the destination, it's really the journey. And that's
Yes.
really where I'm at now, is that I find more enjoyment and I'm more engaged in the process of doing my day-to-day, whether it's working with athletes or just trying to self-improve myself and still be that athlete that I was 10 years ago. And you're going to have in your head where you were, because we're all still 17 in the head, aren't we? I mean, everyone's the same. We're just trapped in these old bodies now. But that for me, the dialing into all that minutiae of what you're trying to do to constantly improve and having that growth mindset, it's definitely more about the journey part rather than the destination, because you may never get to the destination. And I think this example of where we are right now is socially is a great way of looking at that. It's all about what we're doing now rather than what's it going to look at the end. But what can we do right now so that when the light of the tunnel eventually appears, that we're ready. And that can be maybe a little bit candy flossy and a little bit wishy-washy. A lot of people have made great changes and they're really, really going to stick by that sort of stuff, whether it's from a personal point of view, a learning point of view, or a relationship point of view. But I think still there's an awful lot of people out there really, really struggling with the situation right now. And that, by the way, is totally allowed. It'll be interesting to see.
Oh, yeah, it's difficult.
Yes, especially for you guys as well, and us as well as a business. It's like, how do we stay relevant?
Totally, yeah. I mean, we're juggling a few things. Like you mentioned earlier on, my wife and I have just had a wee baby. You know, we had a daughter in just the start of March, 1st of March. And that's hard because in some ways, because of the lockdown, we've got loads of time to spend with her. So you'd think it would just be amazing. We're on holiday, you know, but actually we're completely isolated from the grandparents, from the support groups, from even the midwives visiting our house, you know. So it's a very tough, especially for Colleen, it's a really tough situation to be in, you know. I mean, we moved down to Innerleithen for the community, and that's the very thing that's suddenly been cut off from us, you know. And I'm sure we're not alone. There'll be tons of people out there that feel isolated and completely lost, you know. So that's like you're saying, it's really important to have goals in those situations as well. No matter how silly they are, you need some sort of thing to work towards and stay positive, because the goalposts have just been shifted, you know.
Yeah, the big thing for me is routine, and routine in a positive way. If you're getting up and you're drinking 7 bottles of beer before you're having your breakfast, that's a routine, you know. And I'm sure a lot of people maybe giggle at that, but
we've all been there. We've all been.
Take it a lump it. There are people actually living that reality right now, and I think it's important that if you have got some, and we're kind of doing a mental health thing right now, I don't know why we've got here, but if you have got someone you haven't contacted recently, just ping them a message and give them a call and just make sure everyone's okay, because as it's been said to death, we're all in this together. But we'll try to bring this back to ultimately coaching, Andy. But so, to finish off, 3 sort of tips that you could give to basically make people more confident on trails. What would your kind of 3 go-to tips be?
More confident on the trails? I would say the first one has got to be your body position. It is by far the most common thing that we correct in riders. And I'm talking experienced riders as well. And I mean, it is a total cliche, but just bend your elbows, you know, like get closer to the bike. And it's not so much about getting your weight forward. I think if I was to sort of condense this down into a tip, the advice is always to just get your weight forward. I don't really think about it that way. I would say get yourself closer to the bike, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to allow for movement. You basically want to keep your body as neutral as possible when you're going down a trail, so that you can handle anything that's happening. The ground is always going to be moving. So if you've got the space to allow for that movement, it makes a huge difference. Sounds simple. See, putting that into practice, it's pretty much impossible. But that's tip number 1, would just be body position, for sure.
And that obviously that as well leads on to off the bike work as well. So it's all very nice being in that position, but you need to have ultimately the strength and the posterior sling and the arms as well. But practice, or good practice, makes perfect. Is that such a thing? I don't know. But
yeah.
It doesn't even have to be necessarily on a trail. It can be literally just on a smooth footpath or whatever. But just getting into that muscle memory and getting used to being in that position, because
it needs to be a reaction. That's the thing. Is like most people don't even realize it when they know they're being watched, or when they're on something they're comfortable with, they look great, and then as soon as they go out of their comfort zone, they do this, and they don't even know it's happening. So that's the trick.
Cool. So that's one tip. What's the second tip?
I would say, so at Dirtschool, we would call this grip points. Okay, so we've maybe done this when we've worked together as well, but it's definitely something that works really well for the racers that we work with, and it's something that once you're conscious of, it'll change the way you think about a trail. Essentially, grip points is shorthand for looking for positive features on the trail. So most people, when they look at something technical or demanding, they see all the obstacles. They see the roots, they see the rocks, the exposure, the tree stumps, you name it. Their eyes are going to those things. And the trick with grip points is to actually scan the trail, and instead of seeing all the obstacles, just pick out all the places where you're going to get grip. Okay. Those are the things that you need to focus on, because if you're looking for the grip, that's exactly what you're aiming for, and that's what you're going to hit. If you're staring at the big tree that you don't want to hit, guess what? You're going straight towards it, So I think that's tip number 2, would just be use grip points.
Yeah. Or don't look at the tree. Don't look at the tree. Oh no,
I've hit the tree. Yeah, no, don't do that. It gets to the point though, once you practice this, that like I find it really interesting the way people describe trails, because one person will say, oh, that horrible bit where there's hardly any grip and there's all that kind of like, there's slippy stuff on the outside, The way that my mates and I would describe it is, oh, that grip point that takes you high, or the high line or something, because we're thinking about it in terms of getting out of the problem, not getting sucked into it. And I think that's definitely something that you can apply to your riding.
Okay, and then to finish off, what's your final top tip for trail confidence?
Final top tip for trail confidence is a kind of a mixture. I almost want to say push with your legs. Now, the easiest way I can describe this is get a set of flat pedals and put them on your bike, because loads of people clip in, and what they don't realize they're doing is when they go over rough stuff, or when they want to lighten the bike to maybe do a jump or a drop off or something like that, they pull on the pedals and they don't even know they're doing it again. And if you're on flat pedals, you can't do that. What you need to do on flat pedals instead is start off closer to the bike, drop your heels, and actually drive your weight against things that are positive. So the way you do a jump properly is you push your weight against the surface. You don't pull the bike into the air. And I think that's one of the best things, a piece of advice out there, is if you can ride off-road trails on flat pedals, chances are you're probably doing it fairly well. You should look at being clipped in as being an advantage, not a necessity. So I would say tip number 3 is flat pedals. Flat pedals win medals, so they say.
And the thing is as well, we're in this kind of point now where I had this goal of learning how to manual before I was 40, and I turned 41 last week, so I need to get in the garden and get practice. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of work on these silly little skills that when you get to a certain point in life, you feel like a bit of an idiot, you feel like you're messing about your bike, but that's ultimately where the skills are learned when you're bike.
That's the very escape that everyone needs in life. And I think you kind of, when you grow up, you reach a certain age and you're not allowed to play anymore. You're just, as an adult, you're just supposed to be able to do things and do them properly. And if you're enjoying yourself too much, then you're not making progress. And I think mountain biking is just the complete opposite of that. Like, it's all about play. It's all about discovering new things and falling off and making mistakes, but ultimately you're pursuing something positive there and enjoying it while you do it. So
I think that is actually the perfect sign off, Andy. So I would just like thank you for being part of our new Insight series. We will be putting out more of these every week, everyone. So do feel free to subscribe and keep in touch with us on our social medias. But for now, Andrew Barlow, head coach of the Dirtschool, thank you very much for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.